of their flight. No human had any control over them. They had already flown more than 465 miles through hostile airspace, under radio silence, with zero GPS. Their wings were plastic. Their brains were code. Each one was a Ukrainian OSA drone cobbled together from off-the-shelf electronics, powered by $89 Chinese flight controllers from AliExpress, and running open-source software. But what they lacked in price, they made up for in intelligence. Behind the rotors and carbon frames were neural networks trained on thousands of satellite images and military schematics. These weren't toys. They were patient, focused, and deadly. From above, they looked like nothing. No radar returns, no heat trails. Just shadows in the dark gliding 160 feet above the ground. Too low to be seen, too smart to be ignored. As they closed in, the operators back in Ukraine could do nothing but watch. The signal bars dropped, the cameras cut out, and the drones slipped into full autonomy. One by one, they began their final descent toward a Russian oil depot worth hundreds of millions of dollars in strategic fuel. The narrator's voice cuts in. Nobody saw it coming. 17 drones, barely worth $100 each, about to outsmart a $500 million air defense network. The game had changed, and Russia was about to learn that in modern war, it's not the biggest weapon that wins. It's the one you never see coming. By the time the drones dipped below 160 feet for their final approach, there were no more signals to send, no commands to give. The war was already in motion, inside the processors of 17 independent artificial intelligences. Each OSA drone carried a thermal camera no sharper than a cheap security system, just 640 x 480 pixels. But that grainy image was enough, because behind the lens was something far more dangerous than a warhead. A neural network trained on over 10,000 satellite images of the Kristallol fuel depot. The AI didn't just see tanks, it understood them. It outlined structural seams, identified access points, and ran a real-time heat signature analysis. Tank number 4 showed a reading of 60.3 degrees Fahrenheit. Tank number 7 was cooler at 53.8 degrees Fahrenheit. Tank number 12 hovered around 53.2 degrees Fahrenheit. But tank number 4 was different, warmer, recently filled. That meant one thing: higher vapor pressure, greater volatility, and maximum explosive potential. No human had to tell the drones what to do. 17 separate algorithms ran the same calculation. 17 digital minds reached the same deadly conclusion. Tank number 4 gets hit first. There was no coordination system, no leader in the sky, just parallel intelligence, each drone silently confirming what the others had already deduced. They didn't argue, they didn't wait, they simply aligned. As they approached the depot, each drone embedded its own serial number into its approach vector, calculating its exact bearing to create overlapping blast zones while avoiding mid-air collisions like a swarm of hornets converging from every direction with perfect, calculated range. The Russians thought they were facing flying toys. What they were actually facing was 17 synchronized computers with one shared decision: strike the heart, burn the rest. By now, the decision had been made. Tank number 4 would be the ignition point. But how the drones would hit it, that's where the true genius of swarm warfare revealed itself. Each OSA drone, now in full autonomous mode, broadcasted nothing and received nothing. Yet they moved as if guided by a shared instinct. Without coordination, they began adjusting their flight path, slight changes in heading: 270 degrees, 275 degrees, 280 degrees, 5-degree offsets that allowed each drone to approach from a unique angle. The goal wasn't just to avoid collision. It was to create overlapping blast patterns and exploit every vulnerability in the depot's structure. Some drones climbed to 260 feet, lining up for steep dives toward the tank rooftops, where the steel was thinnest. Others stayed level at 160 feet to target the upper walls where vapor gathered, ready to ignite. And a few dropped even lower, down to 100 feet, aiming for structural weld lines at the tank bases, the weakest points under pressure. From a distance, the formation looked like chaos, an uncoordinated flock of metal birds drifting toward a target. But then, without warning, that chaos snapped into order. What had been a loose, scattered group suddenly formed a deliberate, predatory shape. A V of death. It wasn't just about energy or efficiency. It was about geometry and devastation. Like a pack of wolves circling before the kill, the drones had calculated their roles. No drone was first by accident. No angle was random. The strike wasn't just simultaneous, it was surgical. From below, nothing seemed unusual. From above, Russia's worst nightmare had taken shape: 17 autonomous hunters, moving as one, locked in on a single truth. The kill shot comes from all sides. As the swarm locked into formation, Russia's billion-dollar defense network stood, a blind. The S-400 Triumph, system touted as one of the most advanced air defense platforms in the world, was designed to shoot down stealth fighters, ballistic missiles, and hypersonic threats at ranges up to 250 miles. But it wasn't built for this. The OSA drones were flying at just under 165 feet well below the radar horizon. Hidden by trees, buildings, and the Earth's curvature, they were ghosts to the system's powerful eyes. The 92 N6E fire control radar scanned the sky like a lighthouse, but it was looking too high. The drones were already within 12 miles when the S-400 even registered a flicker. By then, it was already too late. Closer to the depot, 4 Panzer S-1 units stood, like guard dog siege, equipped with 12 missiles and twin 30mm cannons. But these weren't guard dogs. They were showpieces armed for flashy threats, not flying shadows. The drone's radar cross-section was smaller than a seagull's. Too small for missile guidance systems to reliably lock. And even if they could see them, they couldn't keep track. Every time radar tried to illuminate the drones, it lost the signal like trying to shine a flashlight on smoke. And the final line of defense? The GPS jammers. Dozens of Pol 21 emitters flooded the air with spoofed signals, hoping to confuse any navigation systems nearby. But the OSA drones didn't care. They weren't using GPS. Just magnetic compasses and dead reckoning like a bomber crew from 1943. You can't jam what doesn't listen. Russia had built a castle for giants. But what came wasn't a giant. It was a swarm of mosquitoes with knives. While Russia's high-tech defenses failed to see what was coming, its infrastructure made the outcome inevitable. The fuel depot at Engels Air Base was built in 1962, during the height of the Cold War. Back then, it was designed to withstand bombing runs from B-52S, not autonomous drones armed with precision-shaped charges. 12 massive cylindrical tanks, each 65 feet in diameter and spaced 100 feet apart, were laid out in a neat grid. To Soviet engineers, it was practical, close enough to share maintenance lines, far enough to avoid one bomb taking out 2. But they never planned for a swarm that could target all 12 at once. The drones didn't need big explosions. They just needed to start the fire. And when the fire started, nothing was ready. The automated fire suppression system, once state-of-the-art, had become a relic. 50,000 liters of firefighting foam sat in underground tanks expired and partially congealed. The deluge nozzles, spaced every 30 feet, were clogged with rust. Heat sensors blinked green in the control room, giving the illusion of readiness. But illusions don't stop fire. The system was built to handle one tank fire, not a simultaneous chain reaction. And when the first explosion came, the foam pumps sputtered. When the second tank blew, the system panicked. By the third, it was done. What remained was a perfect storm. Outdated infrastructure, neglected maintenance, and no plan for modern war. Back in 1962, this depot was considered invincible. In 2025, it faced 17 lines of machine code and $89 flight controllers. The past had built a fortress. The future came with wings and a match. The stage was set, outdated infrastructure, blinded defenses, foam that couldn't flow and radars that couldn't see. All that remained was the spark. At exactly 3:08 a.m., the first drone struck. Traveling at 94 miles per hour, it dove at a precise angle and slammed into tank number 4, just as every AI had planned. Its 7-pound shaped charge, molded into an inverted copper cone, punched through over 0.3 inches of steel like a hot knife through wax. A fraction of a second later, Inside the vapor-filled chamber above 2,000 tons of aviation fuel, it detonated. What followed wasn't a fireball. It was a fuel-air explosion, with a shockwave moving at over 6,300 miles per hour. The tank's steel roof, 15 tons of it launched into the night sky like a manhole cover from hell, spinning before crashing 650 feet away. The tank's walls peeled open like a banana, and a tidal wave of flaming fuel surged across the concrete containment berm. 10 seconds later, the second drone struck. Then the third. Then the fourth. Each drone was spaced to maximize timing, hitting one tank after another with precision spacing to force a cascading chain reaction. Like lighting a row of matches, one by one. The heat was beyond comprehension. Temperatures soared past 3,300 degrees Fahrenheit. Fire crews arriving from Angles Air Base couldn't get within 1,600 feet before their windshields bubbled and tires softened. Inside the depot, valves designed to shut off fuel flow melted, sending even more fuel into the inferno. There was no firefighting effort, only observation, only awe. 17 drones had turned a Cold War-era fuel depot into a furnace. And the worst wasn't over yet. By 3:12 a.m., the air above the Angles fuel depot glowed like a second sunrise. 4 tanks had exploded in full detonation. 6 more were engulfed in flames. The fire had consumed nearly 20,000 tons of specialized aviation fuel, and with it, the beating heart of Russia's long-range bomber capability. This wasn't just any fuel. It was T6A, strategic-grade aviation blend, a high-performance mix laced with additives to prevent freezing at 50,000 feet, specifically engineered for the Tuesday 160 Blackjack and Tuesday 95 milliseconds Bear nuclear-capable bombers. It cannot be substituted by standard kerosene, and it cannot be replaced quickly. With a single drone strike, Ukraine had grounded Russia's entire strategic bomber fleet. Not damaged, not delayed, grounded. Crews across multiple air bases, thousands of miles from the strike zone, woke to emergency alerts. Missions were canceled, hangars went dark, fuel systems were locked down as commanders scrambled to assess inventory. But the math was cruel. The only depot capable of fueling long-range nuclear missions had just been turned into a crater. The financial cost alone was staggering. Estimates ranged from $300 to $500 million in direct damage, but the strategic loss was immeasurable. For decades, the Tuesday 160 fleet represented the Kremlin's threat projection across continents. Overnight, it became a fleet of paper planes sitting in silence. In Kyiv, officials offered no public comment, no claim, no press conference. They didn't need one. Because for every Russian general staring at a grounded warbird, one truth now echoed louder than any explosion. If drones can fly 470 miles to Angles, and Moscow is only 520 miles away, what's next? The strike didn't just break steel, it broke certainty. The fire would rage for hours, the wreckage would smolder for days. But the message had already been delivered, louder than any press release, more precise than any missile. This wasn't just a strike. It was a rewrite of warfare itself. 17 drones, each costing less than a high-end smartphone, had slipped past one of the world's most expensive air defense systems, destroyed a critical strategic fuel depot, and grounded a nuclear bomber fleet. Not with brute force, but with intelligence, simplicity, and autonomy. Military theorists across the globe began rethinking everything. How do you defend against enemies that don't use GPS? How do you track targets that don't show up on radar? How do you stop a swarm that doesn't even talk to itself? For decades, dominance in the skies belonged to nations with stealth bombers, supersonic fighters, and billion-dollar defense platforms. But now, the balance had shifted. Air superiority was no longer about size or speed. It was about adaptability, unpredictability, and code. This was war fought by machines that cost less than a dinner for two in Moscow, and yet they dismantled an empire's sense of control. There were no pilots to interrogate, no signals to jam, no central command to disrupt, just plastic frames, open-source software, and neural networks with a singular mission. And that mission succeeded. Across command bunkers and war rooms in Moscow, one unspoken question now lingered. If this can happen once, how do we stop it from happening again? because in the early morning hours of the 6th of June, 2020,